Joining us to talk more about China's inserting itself between the Israelis and the Palestinians is Craig Snyder, President and CEO of the World Affairs Council of Philadelphia. That's a nonprofit dedicated to informing and engaging people on national and international issues. Craig, are you surprised to see China getting involved, and what's their motivation here?
I think it's shocking. As recently as a couple of years ago, the idea of a Chinese peace plan for the Middle East might have been sort of the punchline of a joke. In fact, colleagues of mine who work in foreign affairs in China were explicitly saying, as recently as a couple of years ago, that China had no ambitions to get involved in global issues that were very far afield from Asia. So this is a big change, and I think it's part of a desire by the Chinese to be seen as a truly global superpower. There have been a number of other signs like this just in recent weeks.
And Craig, how much support do you see China getting from the international community, and specifically from whom for its involvement in this?
Well, this is uncharted territory, so it's hard to predict. But I think what we're going to see is there are a number of nations around the world that owe an increasing amount to Chinese economic power, that are enmeshed in Chinese economic power. And I think we're going to see them sort of rally behind the idea of China as a global leader. There's a push and there's also a pull here, which is I think the Chinese believe that the United States, which has been the center of international security arrangements for over 75 years, is going through a period of disarray, perhaps of retrenchment, and that they can, should, and will fill that role. And we're going to see whether other countries follow them. I think you're going to see quite a few follow them. Now, in the specifics of the plan, they have essentially adopted much of what has been the Palestinian side historically. Return to 67 borders, establishment of East Jerusalem as the capital of an independent Palestinian state. That has broad support in the third world, in the developing world. And I think the Chinese are trying to rally their leadership of the developing world in direct opposition to what they see as a receding United States.
Well, and to your point about China being an economic power, one of the points that they listed involves economic development on both the Israeli and the Palestinian side as a way to bring them together. Does China see the conflict as being perhaps a market opportunity for them?
Well, I think the Chinese try to see everything as a market opportunity, and they've done pretty well with that point of view. But it's interesting because there's been increased cooperation and increased economic integration between Israel and China. The Chinese may put some of that at risk with what they're doing now. But as has been the case historically for decades, the collectively larger market are countries that oppose Israel. So the Chinese, I think, would like to have their cake and eat it too. They'd like to continue to have economic relations with Israel, but they'd like to shore up this image as a global superpower that is able to intervene on behalf of countries and people that are opposing Israel.
And Craig, to your point that China and Israel do have growing economic ties, particularly in the high-tech sector. But is that enough in terms of China having leverage over Israel to push it to the negotiating table? Because, like you said, this deal really does favor the Palestinians. So what leverage does China have over Israel?
I don't think China has any significant leverage over Israel. I think that the Israeli body politic, almost from right to left, and certainly center right and center left, have sort of coalesced against the idea of a two-state solution at any time in the foreseeable future because of realities that they perceive as existing on the Palestinian side. And I don't think the Chinese could have any impact on Israel's broad perception of what's in its security interest. I think this really has much more to do with Chinese global ambitions and China positioning itself vis-a-vis the United States on the world stage than it will have any material impact on the ground in the Middle East.
And Craig, fair to say that Israel, simply out of deference to China's status as a global superpower, that explains why Israel is not rejecting their plan outright, even though, as you pointed out, it includes a lot of things that the Israelis simply will not accept.
I think that's exactly right. I think if Prime Minister Netanyahu could speak sort of freely on this issue, he'd probably tell the Chinese that if they're really interested in world peace, they should look in their own backyard, namely the Korean Peninsula, to try to use their diplomatic and economic power rather than coming into the Middle East. But the reality is that that's something that the Prime Minister probably won't say in public.
Craig Snyder, President and CEO of the World Affairs Council. Craig, thanks for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thank you.